Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
Introducing St. Jude Flashpoint.
We don't get to choose what happens to us, but we do get to choose how we let it affect us.
Rate, review, and subscribe to St. Jude Flashpoint.
This is the Daily Memphian Politics Podcast. I'm Bill Dries. Our main event is Memphis City Council member Rhonda Logan. Top of the podcast, 7 finalists for Memphis Police Director announced. This is the group of finalists recommended by the International Association of Chiefs of Police out of 40 to 50 applicants in a process that the association is allowed to keep private. 3 current deputy chiefs at the MPD among the group of 7, Sharonda Hampton, Samuel Hines, and Michael Sheeran, along with 4 police brass from outside Memphis. The biggest name among those 4 is Ann Kirkpatrick, the former police chief of Oakland, California, who was fired last year by that city's police commission, with the city's mayor backing the call. Kirkpatrick has filed a whistleblower lawsuit saying she was fired for refusing to do favors for a member of the police commission there. Kirkpatrick, a Memphian and Hutchinson School grad, as well as a University of Memphis alum, starting her law enforcement career on the MPD in the 1980s. The Memphis Police Department's first 2 directors, Jay Hubbard and Buddy Chapman, came from outside the ranks. Every director since Chapman has been from the ranks. Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland says several citizen panels will interview each of the 7 finalists in closed sessions. Then he will do the same. From there, he could pick one of the 7 as the new police director, or he could pare the group down to a smaller set of finalists and get more input. Either way, he expects to send the nomination to the City Council for confirmation in April. Current Memphis Police Director Michael Rawlings retires effective mid-April. The same day, the city unveiled the new public database on excessive force complaints against Memphis police officers and investigations of those complaints, along with data about the use of force by Memphis police. The city council called for the database modeled along the lines of a similar use of force portal the Chicago Police Department has. The council's resolution was a reaction to reports in the Daily Memphian by the Institute for Public Service Reporting at the University of Memphis and its independent review of complaints with limited access to what are supposed to be public records. The reporting also found that while internal police investigations confirmed misconduct by police officers, many of those findings were not automatically referred to the District Attorney General's Office for criminal investigation. And a third of the findings of excessive force reviewed by the Institute were later reversed by police brass. Tennessee Health Commissioner Dr. Lisa Piercy still wrapping up her investigation of how the Shelby County Health Department handled or mishandled COVID vaccinations. But she says the proof so far shows that no one here got a vaccination of bad or ineffective vaccine, despite 2,400 doses being thrown out in 7 separate instances in February because they were past expiration guidelines for the cold storage vaccines. Piercy scrubbing a March 12th special meeting with Shelby County commissioners to present the findings. That may happen this coming week, and if it does, it will include details on the rebuild of the county health department that Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris pledged when he announced the resignation of Elisa Haushalter as health department director, effective at the end of this month. Meanwhile, Harris appointing his Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, LaSonia Hall, as interim Health Department Director for what is expected to be a 3-month assignment as a national search for a new leader is underway. The bill in the Tennessee legislature seeking to start ouster proceedings against Nashville Chancellor Ellen Hobbs Lyle for her 2020 rulings expanding absentee voting access has died in committee there. And the sponsor of the bill, Murfreesboro Republican Tim Rudd, says he's been betrayed by other Republicans on the panel in a voice vote that he wanted to be a roll call. The gavel can fall quickly in Nashville. Tennessee Secretary of State Trey Hargett coming out against the U.S. House bill H.R. 1, which would undo many of the state restrictions on voting. The bill includes eliminating the photo ID requirement Tennessee and several other states have, as well as opening up absentee voting. Hargett calls it a federal takeover of elections. By contrast, Congressman Steve Cohen of Memphis, who chairs the House subcommittee that deals with voting rights, says the bill will, quote, restore public confidence in the integrity of U.S. elections. Cohen says the most important provision in the bill is redistricting, with nonpartisan redistricting commissions redrawing district lines every decade by U.S. Census numbers. Currently, the Tennessee legislature draws its own district lines, as well as those of the state's 9 congressional districts. That part of the bill would not extend to local governments, where the Memphis City Council and Shelby County Commission draw their own district boundaries, the County Commission also drawing the districts of the Shelby County Schools Board. Cohen is also a co-sponsor of a new bill called the Prohibiting Punishment of Acquitted Conduct Act. The legislation targets the ability of federal judges to enhance or add to sentences of those convicted on federal charges based on previous federal charges that can come up in pre-sentencing reports. The reports, which can only be seen or viewed by attorneys and the court, are comprehensive reports that delve into a defendant's background after their conviction. That can include previous charges where a defendant may have been acquitted of the charges or the charges were dropped and dismissed. The standard for factoring in those charges is a preponderance of evidence, a lesser or different standard than beyond a reasonable doubt, the standard for juries in criminal cases. A preponderance of evidence is the standard in civil cases. Shelby County Republicans preparing for party conventions in April as part of electing party leaders every 2 years. Shelby County Democrats putting off their spring conventions until the summer, in August specifically. Meanwhile, new state Democratic Party Chairman Hendrell Remus staffing up in Nashville. The hires include Tamara Bates, Director of Political Affairs, who comes to the state from being Regional Field Director of Woke Vote, one of the groups working to flip Georgia's 2 U.S. Senate seats this past January, and Joshua Karp as Strategic Communications Advisor, who comes to the state from Communications Director for the Florida Democratic Party, and also as a communications strategist to John Ossoff, one of the 2 Democrats who flipped those Senate seats in Georgia. In the mail this week, the first batch of property reappraisals from the Shelby County Assessor's Office. This is the once every 4-year reappraisal that leads into recertifying and resetting property tax rates to reflect the change in property values. The notices are usually pretty bureaucratic looking, all text, a title at the top, with lots of phone numbers and URLs for questions and more data. This time, however, Assessor Melvin Burgess Jr. redesigned the notice to include a back flap taken up by a color picture of himself on it and his name in the biggest type on that half-page layout. Primaries for Shelby County elections, by the way, are about 1 year and 2 months away. Jay Bailey, Chief Administrative Officer to Burgess, doubling down on the new notices, saying Burgess is, in his words, owning what is usually not the most welcome government notice that taxpayers get. And with this reappraisal, lots of property owners are already noticing big jumps in their property values and wondering about the property tax wallop they might be about to take. The Tennessee Historical Commission voting this past week to remove the bust of Confederate general, slave trader, and Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard Nathan Bedford Forrest from the state capitol. But the leaders of the House and Senate, Cameron Sexton and Randy McNally respectively, want a legal opinion from the state attorney general. They claim the Historical Commission may not be the final word on this long-standing controversy. They claim state law gives the authority to the legislature. Joining us now is Memphis City Council member Rhonda Logan. This has been a busy week for the future of the Memphis Police Department, Councilwoman. So let's start there. What are your first impressions of the 7 finalists to succeed Michael Rawlings as director of the MPD?
Well, the thing that I am impressed about, and first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate being here, and I appreciate the work that you do in terms of responsible journalism in Memphis. But back to the question at hand, I was impressed by the fact that they're all veterans somewhat. They all have a long history in public safety, and that's a good thing, particularly here in Memphis. You know, we want to make sure that we have someone that's seasoned and that has seen, been involved or engaged in or introduced to several different types of settings and city settings. So I was glad to see that they had extensive history.
Mm-hmm. You led a council task force that looked at police reform and made some recommendations that clearly pointed to the need for change in the way we approach policing in Memphis. Go over some of those points and talk, if you will, about what you see as both the necessity and the challenge of changing the role of police in Memphis.
Okay. The first question. Let me go back to what's the first part of that question?
The recommendations that came from the group that you led.
Okay. Well, the public safety task force that I led generally came about from the residency question and discussion that we were having. We wanted to make sure that we looked at best practices as it relates to hiring, training, retaining, what else? And so, for our public safety officers, just to make sure that we're all working together in the same vein for the same things as it relates to our public safety officers, and in particular, the police. And through that 6-month period, we were looking at what is being done to increase the number of applicants for our police department. There was talk about they could not find enough applicants. We didn't have a stock of applicants to choose from or qualified officers. And so where are you looking? How are you looking? What are the best practices? And those were some of the things that we wanted to just see. And it came out of the discussion and out of even public comment that let's look at homegrown talent. Let's look at growing the talent. How are we interacting with the residents and encouraging young people to go into public safety? How are we reaching out to our schools, our communities, our churches, our neighborhoods to find and identify those that are qualified to be groomed to move into that space? And so that was one of the things that was very important, that we began to not just look outside, but what are we doing to as we look inside? Are we going to the at that time, the college fairs? Are we engaged with the young people and teaching them about public safety at a young age? Are we starting with the elementary school children to change the narrative and how they see and view public safety? There was a time when kids wanted to be policemen. They wanted to be doctors, lawyers, policemen. And, there was a healthy relationship between the community and police officers. It wasn't just police brutality and those types of things. That weren't just looking at that, but we really looked at our policemen and public safety officers as our heroes and protectors. And, we wanted to create that again. We think it's important to change the narrative if we're going to have more people interested in serving the community. And that involves the media, that involves the story that they're telling as it relates to police and citizens and community. So that was one of the more important things I think that came out of that. And we also wanted to look at transparency in how we are serving the community, making certain that there's an opportunity for citizens to speak to what's going on, to talk about the things that they feel are encouraging the wrong narrative. When there's something that's going on in the police department that has an adverse effect on the community, that there's transparency and accountability, and that people are able to speak to that. I think that was another thing that came out of it, as well as looking at operations, making sure that we are utilizing best practices in how we're scheduling, how we're using the time for our public safety officers, the patrolling, and just exactly what's being done, how much time is spent where, and those types of things. And it was more so for us as a community to let's talk about this. Let's look at it, not necessarily to point the finger or anything like that, but wanted to make sure that we have all eyes and all hands on deck, that we are getting the best for the money in the city of Memphis from our public safety departments. One thing that came out was the fire department. They were doing some innovative things, and they were on target for their complement. And so let's look at some of the things that they're doing. And if we're not doing it on the police side, maybe there's some things that we could look at implementing on that side. But we had a healthy conversation. We were very candid, very open. I appreciate Chief Smith for allowing us to have that discussion with her. Since she came on board, there are a lot of things that have been implemented that have helped move the needle, and we're very appreciative of that. Even now, they're undergoing an audit, which is one of the things that we asked for concerning their operations, and we'll be hearing from her and talking to her more about that in detail. But just an overall snapshot and view, or an in-depth actually conversation about what's going on. Why can we not find recruits? Why is there such a high turnover and things like that? And we did note that there is a definite need for more policemen, more officers that we have now. We want to look at promotions and retirement, attrition, and all of that. So the task force, we looked at 2,500 officers as opposed to 2,800 officers, and as opposed to the 21 that we have now. So that's kind of in the middle, and it accounted for those deficiencies in numbers in the complement that they did share with us.
And in fact, 2,500 has become now the accepted number after some debate about higher or lower on this. And we should also note, when you talked about Chief Smith, that is Alex Smith, who is the city's human resources chief.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There has been much discussion, as you noted, about community policing. And I think the more of these discussions that I've heard, the more apparent it has become that the term probably has different meanings depending on who is talking about it. So when you talk about community policing, specifically, this was a push for more co-act community policing sites or substations with this task force.
Absolutely. I want to note that Memphis, some years ago, we were noted nationally for having one of the more innovative and engaged community policing models. Actually, the national model that President Obama used was, from my understanding, somewhat or loosely tailored according to the Memphis model. And, after speaking with a number of veteran officers and different agencies and different policemen and high officials in MPD, just doing research and talking to people, I've found that it was very successful. And that model is the model that, if it worked well then during a climate that was just as high in a crime as it is now, it's something that we need to look at and really revisit and review to make certain that we continue being engaged as public safety officers with our youth, being engaged with the communities at that level, having officers more visible in the community, more engaged, and not necessarily taking them from what they're supposed to be doing, but incorporating that into the model, making sure that something as simple as, when you leave for the day, ride through the neighborhoods on your way home, or get involved in the schools that are there with the children. And one thing they did do that I noted back then was they had an ex-gang member as a consultant, or just to have an informed conversation on all sides, because a lot of times we talk about or we implement policy based on what we think is going on or what we think is happening, but we're not totally informed. And so we tend to not have a comprehensive program. And that's one of the things that I mentioned for this new program that Mayor Strickland introduced. I wanted to make sure that we had all of the necessary people involved and engaged in the conversation.
Right. So when there's all of this talk about we've got to have more police officers and we've got to have them right now to stop violent crime, your approach to that seems to be, I don't disagree with you that we may need more and we can discuss how many, but before we rush to fill up the ranks, we've got to know what they're going to be doing differently.
Correct. What they're going to be doing differently. And we got to know what's needed. Like, what is informing your decision or idea that we need more? What are they going to be doing? What is the need? Those are the types of things that we, just having more to do the same thing. And if the same thing is not getting us what the results we want, then that's not the best use of the officers or public safety dollars. But I know, we're in a challenging and trying time in our city. We definitely are understaffed. And I've always felt that we should have the well-trained, well-staffed, and well-compensated public safety departments. And so, but we want to make sure we have all three, well-trained. We wanted to make sure that the officers are spending the amount of time needed in the training that's necessary, that's going to yield the best results. And there were, some recommendation as far as changing some of the time that they are spending in certain areas, and maybe reducing some of the time in other areas, such as those that deal with like military kind of combat and things like that, but increasing time. Increasing time that they spend in de-escalation, in community awareness, and those types of things. So I have no problem. I myself and the people that I represent have all noted, yes, we definitely want enough officers to do what we need them to do. But here is what we feel is needed, the community police and the COAC units. And so I, myself and Councilwoman Swearingen, who was a part of this as co-chair, we, both made sure that those things were included in the resolution that we submitted and that was approved by council.
Right. And you heard from Director Rawlings, who said, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure we can do, I think it was 6 COAC centers that you recommended be brought back. And he said, well, I'm not sure financially we can do that. And with the manpower we have now, and you and Councilwoman Swearingen kind of came back at him, not in a way to attack him, but just to let him know that, no, we really want this.
Absolutely. My approach is always, how can we get it done? Not, how many things are keeping us from doing it. How can we get done what we're trying to do? The essence of what's needed here. And like I told them, the discussion was, we always, as elected officials, have to be innovative and have to be forward thinking and have to look at how things can get done, because the citizens are counting on us. We can't just say, I don't know, or it's not possible. But if what you're asking for is not possible, what is possible? Because there's always an opportunity to implement things that are necessary. And with crime being as high as it is, the crime rate being as high as it is, as many fatalities and many murders and things that are going on in our city, that's a priority. It is a priority. We don't have the luxury of saying, we don't have the money for it right now.
Right.
But even if, and the recommendation was 3, let's just start 3. And we ultimately wanted 1 in each district, or we wanted 6 units. And we came to a happy medium during the public safety ad hoc that let's look at 3. And during the ad hoc committee meetings, that was the consensus that everybody agreed on. But once we presented it, it was a pushback on it. So we won't be letting up on that.
And to be clear here, the police department and the administration were part of that ad hoc discussion.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, they were a part of it. And so, we had we had Chief Smith, we had Director Rollins and his staff and designees when he couldn't make it. We had city council members, we had community members, residents. We had fire chief rep there and her representatives when she couldn't make it. And we also invited the police and fire unions, a representative from the unions. We wanted to make it comprehensive. We wanted everybody at the table. We wanted to hear from everybody because it's going to take all of us to move the needle. I commend our public safety departments and leadership, but we have to do more.
We are about to go into another budget season at City Hall. Your second as a council member is coming up. What are you looking for when the mayor presents his budget and this process begins?
Well, I really am, wanting to make sure that we're in position to continue in a positive direction as it relates to our tax base and the funding, the revenue that comes in. We've implemented the Accelerate, where we're looking at the Accelerate Memphis, and we've approved that. And, there will be a bill for that coming down the road. So, we want to make sure that each year leading to that we have a healthy budget and we have things in place that will make certain that when we get there, we're able to pay the bill. That's one of the things. And we want to make sure that there's programming in place for the youth. The last, if I'm not mistaken, it was our last budget or last address that he introduced the service corps. And so I want to, make sure that there are dollars in place for neighborhoods, dollars in place for our youth and youth programming for the youth. Want to make sure that we have dollars in place that will in turn lead to a stronger workforce. Those types of things, are really important at this time. Right.
Let me get your quick take here on Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. The utility president and CEO, J.T. Young, has put on hold the look at possibly leaving the Tennessee Valley Authority for another electric power provider. What's your quick take on that? Is that the right thing to do?
Well, I can speak to the fact that I can speak to my position on it. I really can't speak to his thoughts about it, but I'm not one to jump to a quick decision either. I do feel like this is a very important decision that we have to make as a council and as a city that will be long lasting and will affect generations to come. And it's important that we get it right. It's not something that we want to do quickly, and you want to be well informed And that's the approach that I'm taking. And it takes time. Some of us are new on the council. We haven't been through this process. And there are a number of voices and there are a number of people chiming in on this discussion. But I want to make sure that we're all informed. There are some very technical things that are involved in this process. And those are things that we have to look at. Are we capable of doing it? And what will that look like? How long will that take? What will happen in the interim? And another conversation, a lot of people are looking at their bill and how high it is. But when you look at the numbers, we have we have comparable rates nationally. And so I don't want people's decision to be based on their rates. Because they're even on our bill, and we'll be talking about that on Tuesday, a third, from 25 to 30% of the bill is not even utilities. Mm-hmm. So, it's not even light, gas, or water. So I want to make sure that we all are listening to the facts and that we're investigating and that we're researching and doing our due diligence and making sure when we have to make that decision, it's representative of the constituents, it's in the best interest of the city, and it's forward thinking in terms of the future of our city and making sure we're healthy. There are promises for a lot of dollars that could be saved. And if that's the case, we definitely want to go that route if we find out after research that that's the best way. But my thought also is it's up to the leadership of MLGNW in the city to have made TVA do what was necessary for the citizens in terms of economic investment, or anything else that we felt we needed from them that should have been a push from leadership. So I don't necessarily hold that against TVA. And then when I look at everything that's gone on in the last few weeks, with nationally with the weather and with looking at how other cities and states were served by their energy companies, or, I kind of take that under consideration because you get a real-time view of how they operate. So sure. That was important as well for us to take a look at that and, dive into that and talk to those people that are in leadership in those other states and see what type of service and get their feedback on it as well. So I just, want us to take a holistic approach. And if we need more time, we need to take more time. I'm not necessarily speaking to what President Young did, but I can understand it. It's not like I said, it's not a decision we want to make hastily.
Right. And the problems and the bill spikes in Texas in particular were definitely a part of the consideration.
Correct.
A final point, we saw each other at Raleigh Springs Civic Center at one of the events the council and the administration undertook to get bottled water during the water pressure crisis last month to people who might not have had access to that. Talk about what that project where the old Raleigh Springs Mall once stood means for the future of that very important corridor in the heart of your district.
Yes, thank you. And it was so good to see you out there as well. But, before I became a city council representative for District 1, and currently I am the executive director of the Raleigh CDC. And when I took that on, it was out of a heart for the community. I've served in that community through my church and through the CDC for over 30 years at this point. And so, that place there, not just for the community of Raleigh, but for the city of Memphis. Most people will have a memory or a fond memory of Raleigh Springs Mall and the city of the area of Raleigh, community of Raleigh, which was the county seat before. I just wanted to drop that.
Yes.
There was the county seat.
Absolutely.
Was. So there's rich history here. The Raleigh Springs was just like the springs that are in Arkansas. but hot springs. And so it was a destination, and we want to see that happen again. And this center, the Civic Center, Raleigh Civic Center, it is, reflective of that renewal. It is a reflection of our resilience in that community. And we're looking for it to be the catalyst for the things to come. When we went through the Memphis 3.0 process, the CDC was the community partner for that, and the Raleigh CDC was. And so, we made certain that the community was engaged. We had elected officials, we had pastors, we had community leaders by way of neighborhood associations and churches and the elderly and youth and teenagers. Everybody was a part of that process. We made sure that we had voices from all across the community to engage in that process. And we came up with a community plan with Memphis 3.0. And so that anchor was a part of that plan as well. We were glad. We said, if we're going to go into this process as a city, we will be involved and engaged and make sure it's a reflection of what we're looking to for the future of this community. And it has been just that. It has been a springboard for the community engaging in continued talks of how, not just talks, but putting up the work as well in terms of increasing the area, the property values, bringing neighborhoods together, implementing policies that will help the small businesses there, or utilizing the resources in the city that are doing that. So everyone's engaged. I see people calling 311 more about things that are going on and making sure, calling code enforcement, reaching out to me about things that they see in the community. Pastors are calling, what can we do? So it created more community engagement and more positive engagement in moving toward the direction that we saw when we first started the process. So it's only been a positive, and we are expecting greater things coming this year from that spot, and using the Raleigh Small Area Plan as a model for the rest of the city. I'm in constant talks with the Department of Planning and Zoning, Planning and Development 901, as well as Memphis 3.0, to make sure we're doing all we can do to make that happen. There are a lot of developers and investors that are looking at the site, and I think that investment that the city made is a catalyst for it. It's the beginning. It's not the end. It's the beginning, and we're grateful for that beginning. We're grateful for that being a catalyst, but there's a lot more work to do, but we're on board to be a part of making that happen. The community, as well as myself as an elected official representing that area, and all of the stakeholders in that area. We look at Methodist North, Amazon, Nike. There are a number of businesses and industries there to make that a remarkable place once again. We have some wonderful residents and communities and neighborhoods, seasoned neighborhoods, that the Accelerate Memphis will afford us the opportunity to give it a little bit more tender love and care, and to move the needle forward in getting us where we need to be.
All right. We will leave it there. We have been talking with Memphis City Council member Rhonda Logan. Finally, 1 year this past week since the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in Shelby County. 1 year later, more than 1,500 deaths in our city and county, almost 90,000 confirmed cases here in a year's time. And so many changes that are more, perhaps, about our reactions to the virus than perhaps the virus itself. With another spring about a week away by the calendar, we may be closer to the end, but not at the end. So many of us looking at the same horizon and seeing such different outcomes. Some believing this right now, right here, is the end. Others still cautious. And if you feel like too many of us are anxious to keep score of who is right about that and who is wrong about that for the satisfaction of our post-pandemic division, well, there isn't a vaccine for that, or a timeline, or a prognosis. This is where the pandemic found us, you see, and this is where we still are. Here's my very small and very manageable hope within the scope of our city. Maybe by September, we will have recovered enough from the pandemic and from our division to gather and mark what has been lost and make our resolutions for the longer haul of our existing divisions. I would propose St. Mary's Episcopal Cathedral on that denomination's September feast day that memorializes the martyrs of Memphis, those who died in the worst of the city's yellow fever epidemics in 1878, another moment unique to our history of loss, both as part of a national loss and as part of a loss in isolation. Maybe we can come together as we have not, certainly since the pandemic began a year ago, but probably as we have not come together for a much longer period of time. Do we really miss each other after this year of the pandemic? Or do we miss the division that had isolated us at times well within 6 feet of each other well before COVID-19? This week on WKNO's Behind the Headlines, we continue our look at reforming local economic development incentives. Our guests are Memphis City Council member Worth Morgan and Edge President and CEO Reed Dahlberger. We'll talk about the recent exit of part of ServiceMaster's downtown presence for Atlanta and larger policy questions about tax abatements and pay. You can hear the podcast of that show on our website now. Subscribe to the Daily Memphian at dailymemphian.com. You can subscribe to this podcast and our others at Google Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. I'm Bill Dries. The Daily Memphian Politics Podcast is produced by Kix Patterson.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.